Hi everyone. If you recall, at the beginning of this year, I established a Patreon account which allows people to support what I do with a monthly subscription. And in doing that, there's a number of benefits to it, and it's a way for me to provide additional content alongside everything else that I do. The commissions, the painting for galleries, the article writing, all the other activities that I get involved with. One of the features of the Patreon account is that I've established a course called Take Your Landscape Painting to the Next Level. And what I want to do here is simply share one of the videos from the course that we've done recently. Have a look at it. I hope you find it helpful and I hope you enjoy watching it. And if you think that a Patreon subscription might be something that you're interested in to access this level of content, then there's a link here. Just click on that. That will give you all the details. I'll also put some details in the description down below as well, so you can click through there too and just have a look, see whether or not it's something that you think might work for you. We're just getting to the end of the first module, and now we're going to be starting to look at some of the ideas around how to look at the landscape and how to translate the things that you see when you're outdoors into paintings. How we develop this idea of landscape looking and how we think about what we see in terms of restrictive formats, and how we translate things like depth and perspective in the landscapes that we see onto something that is simply a two-dimensional image. So we're looking at some concepts here that are a little bit more in depth, but will provide a very strong foundation to those of you that want to take your landscape painting to the next level. I chose this particular video because a lot of you through YouTube and my Instagram account and the emails that I get regularly have asked me a lot about sketching and how important it is, and how do we sketch, how do we make the most out of it, and are there certain types of sketchbooks we should use? Well, in this video, building a sketchbook, I just show you two main areas that I focus on when I'm sketching. Have a look at it. I hope you enjoy it. I don't really need to say any more than that. Skip on over to the Patreon account if you'd like to see more. Hi everyone, it's a gorgeous sunny afternoon here in Swanage, and in this video what I want to do is talk to you about the practice of building a sketchbook. Now, I've spoken before in this series about the importance of sketching and keeping a sketchbook that contains your ideas and the records that you make of places and moments, but I just want to have a look at that in a little bit more detail. Now, there tends to be two different types of sketchbook, and I'm not talking about paper or hardback or paperback covers or anything like that. The first type of sketchbook is something that I call the journal sketchbook, and you see quite a lot of this on social media, and in fact I make sketchbooks like this too, but they're perhaps not quite so sketchy as a traditional view of a sketchbook. And for a journal sketchbook, what I mean is something that has a feel of almost being curated. So it might have a theme or a particular topic, or it can be based on a location or a season of the year. And the sketches in it are beautiful, but they often take on the appearance of being something close to a finished painting. There'll often be little journal notes to it, and they're wonderful to thumb through and just to have a look at as a memoir, a record of a place or time. This book here is an example of that, and it contains sketches that I've made over the last couple of years, having stayed at this cottage here in Dorset, and it's got images that are, I would say, not far off being finished paintings. They have notes attached to them, and it's a lovely record of my time spent here. But I've also got a sketchbook here, and I call this more of a training sketchbook, and perhaps a more honest and natural sketchbook
in some ways, because in here there's a whole range of different things. There's all manner of little sketches, thumbnail sketches, jottings, scribblings, that type of thing. In some ways, that type of sketchbook is more important, but I want to show you how to put both together and what are the benefits of doing that. Now, of course, it's entirely possible that you have one sketchbook and it's got both different types of sketches in here. You might have your sort of training sketches, if you like, or your journal sketches all together in one sketchbook. Perfectly okay. But no matter what you decide to do and the type of sketches you like to make, the key is understanding why this is so important to your development as a landscape painter. Sketching is hugely important because it enables you to do a number of things. Firstly, it helps you to familiarize yourself with your subject. It forces you to look very carefully and to observe and make a record of what it is you're seeing. That helps you when you come on to make final paintings or more considered work if you're working at home, working in a studio, whatever it is. If you've spent time familiarizing yourself with your subject through a sketchbook, then you're going to be in a better position to understand what you're doing. Sketching, particularly in what I call a training sketchbook, is a perfect place to try out ideas and to experiment in a way that is reasonably low risk. It's what all professional sports people do. You don't find many football teams, cricket teams, whatever sport you follow, suddenly doing something radically different in the middle of an important game. They will have tried out ideas and practiced them on the practice ground where the result is not quite so important. It's exactly the same with a sketchbook. You can make a mess and play around with things, test things out that perhaps you wouldn't have the freedom to do in the middle of a painting when you've got a nice expensive piece of paper stretched out and ready to go. Sketchbooks give you that freedom, and that's why they are so important, because you learn far more when you're experimenting, when you're playing around, when you're practicing, than you do when you are working your way through a finished painting. And I've talked before about the 4Ds, this structure that I like to use for my paintings, and the first of those is decisions, and sketching helps you to make those decisions. So getting into the habit of having a sketchbook that's always there, where you can make little jottings, you can try different things out, it's really, really important. I tend to group sketches into one of three categories. First is what I call an impression sketch, and it's where you have maybe limited time or you're in front of a situation that's changing rapidly and you use the most rustic and seemingly slapdash of marks on your paper to capture and describe what it is you're seeing. And people that look through your sketchbook will take a look at those sketches and think, I'm not quite sure what they had in mind while they were doing that. But you knew what you were doing. You were responding to what was in front of you and trying to capture it as quickly as you possibly could. So that's an impression sketch. They're really important. The second thing is an information sketch, and I suppose the vast majority of my sketches fall into this category. Perhaps you've got more time on your hands and you can sit down and take more time to study and consider your subject. And the sketch that you make contains information, whether that's colour, contrast, composition, detail, atmosphere. You get that packed into your sketch, and then it becomes a very useful reference point to work from in future paintings. And I often work from just my sketch, because what I've done in the process of making it is to distill a huge amount of information down into something that's quite small and restricted. And working from that as opposed to a photograph gives me a lot more freedom. And then I'm just concentrating on the things that were important to me when I made that sketch. And don't think that an information sketch just has to be a nice sweeping landscape vista. Of course not. It might be some small piece of detail, simply a boat or a clock tower, a small tree, something like that. You don't need to make sketches all the time of finished landscapes or what you consider to be landscape paintings. And the third type is what I call an ideas sketch. And these are often very small. In fact, a number of artists, myself included, call them thumbnail sketches. And I will often do these before I approach a painting. If I'm looking at a scene and I'm not quite sure exactly what elements to put where, or whether or not I could improve the composition by moving things around, or perhaps whether different colour combinations could work, make small little sketches, you know, this sort of size, and do a number of them and play around with the different ideas until you come up with something that you think is a pleasing combination and will work in a final painting. So impression sketches, information sketches, idea sketches. They're your three main categories. I look for opportunities to make them and look for opportunities to build up a sketchbook that has your workings in it. And it's something you can look back on over time. And when you do, you realize you've made progress and you can see how your thinking and your ideas have developed with regard to the medium of watercolor and with regard to the landscape itself as a subject. Okay, this is what I refer to as a journal style sketchpad or sketchbook, and it's a collection of sketches and a few notes, and something that I've put together over the years, last 2 or 3 years really, during my visits down here to the Isle of Purbeck. And in it, it's just got sketches, jottings, but these are starting to take on more of an appearance of finished paintings. There's a little bit more consideration that's gone into these. Some of them are done on location, some of them have been done after I've been somewhere and come back if I haven't had time to make a sketch. And putting a sketchbook together like this is just a really nice way of recording your memories of a particular time and place. I think I've mentioned this one before. Oops is there for a good reason, because I just started painting it upside down, but things like that happen in a sketchbook. It doesn't matter, it all adds to the character. And I love this. It's just a great way of recording memories in quick little sketches. And I'd recommend it's something that you have a go at doing. And what happens is, after a while, you start to do more of these sketches, and then you think, well, I better do a few more, and it sort of prompts you to get outdoors and do more painting, and that's not a bad thing. You can look back over, you know, years in a book like this, and it's just a lovely thing to have. So that's the journal sketchbook. Now this sketch pad, which is just a sort of heavy cartridge paper pad, is more what I refer to as a training sketch pad, if you like, where you're trying out different ideas, you're getting used to techniques, you're playing around with compositions and colours and contrast and all that sort of thing. And there's a lot of pencil sketches in here, some watercolour sketches. These ones here, I've ended up doodling on them for whatever reason, playing around with some Bista ink here. Slightly more considered sketch there, testing out a colour palette, and here's one that I was just planning out for a demo where I've made some notes on it for my own reference. These little thumbnail sketches where I'm just playing around with some imaginary ideas. What's the best place to arrange the landscape with regard to this tree? And this is perhaps a more of a honest type of sketchbook, if you like. It's where you are trying out everything, and it's a very important record of your progress, of your skills, and of the way that you think as an artist. Now what I'm going to do in this video is a couple of quick sketches. I'm going to go down to the little harbour area that's just the other side of the cottage here, and there's a nice collection of fishing boats and lobster pots and all manner of different interesting objects there. And I like to sketch those because I find them challenging. It can be difficult sometimes to get the shape of boats right, particularly when they're foreshortened or they're sitting at a funny angle. And this is another thing that sketching is really good for. Challenging yourself, finding subjects that you struggle with a little bit. And instead of committing to a painting, get the sketchbook out and go and practice it and have a go. Then what I'm going to do is go up onto the downs and just do a sketch of Swanage Bay. I'll probably do that across the whole sketchbook here, and just put another record of Swanage Bay in my sketchpad here that I'm building up of my Purbeck experiences at the cottage, so I think that'll be fun to do as well. So I've just come down to this fisherman's area at the Peveril Point end of Swanage Bay. I love it, it's fantastic. It's just an old working area, and the boats give lots of opportunities and lots of nice subjects to sketch. So let's go and do that. Now I'm just going to do a quick sketch of this little boat here. There's a couple of nice ones. There's Boy Matt, which has a Penzance registration, but I thought in honour of my sister Jennifer, I would do PE219, a pool registration that is called Lady Jen. So let's give this a quick go. And what I'm doing in this sketchpad here is just trying to sort of get down some information as quickly as I can. I'm not really that bothered about making a sort of finished sketch here. When I do these type of sketches, I try to avoid bringing a pencil rubber with me because it just helps me to be a bit more spontaneous. I can feel my way around the subject a bit easier, and you need to do that when you're sketching boats because these shapes aren't particularly easy. But if you can keep your pencil as close to the pad as possible and just allow these lines to connect themselves up, you generally end up with something that is quite realistic, and you're sort of tracking the shape, you're getting a feel for it. These lobster pots here, these are kind of interesting things, and I'm going to put those in because they crop up from time to time in my paintings, and they often cause me a problem because they're strange shapes, they're not solid, they're sort of made out of rope and wire, and I never quite know how to paint them. But perhaps if I draw some, I'll get a bit more used to their form and the structure, and this is what sketching's all about. It really helps you so that when you come to make a painting and you're going to bump into subjects like this, you've got some reference and you've got something to sort of fall back on. You've tried sketching these before, and really does help. You'd be surprised. This one's come down a bit too low. This one should be sort of down here, more like that. In fact, they all should be a bit bigger. Let's come down here. If I was observing correctly, then I would have got that right first time round, but that doesn't matter too much. You can just see the back of the keel here. Important to get that in. And then there's this blue band that runs across the back of the boat. It's not drawn correctly. There's another small plaque there. I don't know if that's a boat builder's plaque or something like that. Something that used to be bolted on the back here, probably an outboard motor. So get that in too. That's good. I'm happy with the shape of this. It's coming together quite nicely. There's something that's just been put over the top here, probably a repair at some stage. Something here, that's an old boat hook or a bit of fishing tackle. I'm not quite sure what that is, but again, let's stick it in. This here, I would guess, is something for holding a fishing rod. The area of hard standing just falls down here towards the sea. Deep shadow running under there. A few ropes and things just falling off the front of the boat. Quite nice to get those in. Oh, I almost forgot the registration number here. And then up here, you can just make it out on the front of the boat. At an angle, of course. There's a few bits of fishing tackle here. I don't know what they are quite. May even be old boat parts, but they look like they're made out of iron and they are heavily rusted, but they all add to the character of this type of subject. Put a bit more work into the lobster pots. I'm just going to drop some quick colour onto here, nothing much, and I have to work quickly because it's sunny and it's windy today, and this is just going to dry on me in no time at all. And this is cartridge paper, this Sketchpad. I like it. It's a nice one from Dale Rowney, and it's good because it's got a hard cover. Good afternoon, passerby. Just sharing pleasantries, always good. And yeah, I like it because it just has a hard back to it, and you can sit it on your knees and get some decent support from that. And I don't really want to do too much with this other than just suggest these huts in the background. They're there. It is literally a background. That's all it is. And I think what I'll do is I'll probably go over this at some point with some pen, have a bit of line and wash. I think that will be quite nice. I'm now going to pick up some of this nice manganese blue. Just drop that in. And all I'm doing really here is just making a simple record of colour without too much accuracy. I'm just not concerned with that when I'm doing a sketch like this. It's literally just a case of slapping these colours down, making sure that there's a nice record there, and I'm just feeling my way into the sketch and the subject. As I regularly tell you, it's a good thing to do. It's a little bit of warm grey just to create some shadow underneath the boat here. And along the back, the sun's just catching the front of that, and there's a shadow just running under the gunnel there. See, the wind's wanting to have a tug at my pages. That's okay, it's all part of the fun of it. Let's just drop some rust here that you always find on these type of fishing boats. They're well worked, they've put in a good shift, and they're just not pristine and sparkling and clean, and it's good to just allow that to run in there. Suggest some rust. There's also quite a bit of sort of old sea matter that's clinging to it, whether it's bits of barnacles or not quite sure what it is, but it's going in there anyway. It just all adds to the character of this. Now, very light treatment here on the lobster pots. There's a nice shadow running underneath those and underneath the boat. Comes down here, not enough blue, lots of pink. Let's change that up. That's catching the sun there, so I'm going to leave that quite bright. Just suggest the contour there that falls away. It's quite a deep shadow inside the boat here. I'm struggling a little bit with the wind here. It's starting to tug at the near corner of the sketch pad, so it's getting a little bit tricky to work, but that's okay. There's quite a strong little band of rusty metal that runs along there. Let's put that in. There we are, that's enough colour to be going on with, I think. I just need to tighten that up with a few pen lines, and I'm really happy with that. It's just a simple record of PE219, Lady Jen sitting there, I don't know, waiting for the next fisherman to come along and say, yes, time to go and get some crab, time to go and get some lobster. I'm just putting a bit of pen over the top here. It's just starting to bring everything together. I'm not bothered about being too fussy. Like I said, this is just a simple record of the boats, colours, tones, no more than that. And do you know what? Some of it is just pure enjoyment. It doesn't necessarily need to end up as a finished painting, or I don't need to use this necessarily for something that I'm going to work from in future. There's a good chance I will, but you don't need to. It can just be enjoyment in and of itself. And I'm sitting here, it's sunny, there's a nice breeze, I can hear the sea, I'm chatting to you lot and sketching. It's just really good fun. If you can think of sketching like that, perhaps it will take some of the fear out of it, of working on location. I've got people walking past, saying hello. Young lad's just come past on his bike and told me that he's cycled all the way across the coast path, and must have only been about 7 or 8 years old. Maybe a bit older than that, but it's just great fun. Really good fun. Try and make something of these lobster pots. Like I said, I always struggle with them, and this is why it's good to sketch things that you're not very familiar with. I think I'd be lying if I said I've mastered it this time round. I haven't. I'm not sure they look like lobster pots, but I know what they're supposed to be. They're just messy, horrible things, but you find them, and so you've got to put them in. And sketching in a book like this, it's one of the things that I like to do, is just challenge myself and try out things, try and get the hang of something that I struggle with. Never a bad idea. Don't like the fact that that one's so close to the back of the boat, but it is, so I don't know, let's just make it come a bit further past. It's too coincidental. Better put the boat's name in, Lady Jen. If I don't, my sister would not be amused. There we are. I think that's quite enough. Hopefully that's given you an idea of what a sketchbook's for. It's just something that you can use to enjoy yourself, something that you can use to get outdoors, something that you can use to play around with ideas, challenge yourself. Like I said, this is it's what I call a sort of training sketchbook, where you're just getting ideas down very quickly. It's a great idea to do, great idea to help you progress with your landscape painting. And the thing is, you see, when you come back to this, and you look through your sketchpad a few years later, it doesn't matter how tidy or messy it is, you will remember being where you were when you made that sketch. And that's what it's all about. Okay, so let's just get a quick sketch of the important elements here. These nice large trees, quite important in the, I say it's in the foreground, it's not really, it's more in the middle distance, but we don't have a lot of foreground going on here. That's okay. And there's this thicket of, it's got everything going on in there. There's sort of small trees, there's brambles, there's blackthorn, there's everything in there. And then we've got this rather nice tree here. I didn't notice what it was actually as I walked past it, and I should know, but I don't. Now let's get the headland in here. This is Ballard Down. It just runs across here, and I'm just going to move it slightly down at the left-hand side just to get that sense that the bay is coming round, which it does. It's important to get the proportions right here. It's easy to make this a little bit too bulky, so observation is the key, as it always is when you're sketching. It's part of the reason for doing it. Just sharpens your observation skills. And then this is Ballard Point here, and then the headland just moves around a little bit further to Old Harry Rocks. You can just see them there. They're just catching this evening sunlight, and it's just catching the tops of them as the sun comes in from the left. Then behind that we have Poole, well it's mainly Bournemouth actually that just runs across here, which is no more than a sort of pale grey line really. There's a couple of large offices there that are always prominent. They seem to catch the evening sun, so let's put those in. Just indicate where the chalk cliff falls away into this sort of area of bluff here. I may have just come down a little too much there on the headland, so I need to be careful with that. But there we are. I think that's okay. Let's put some paint on and turn this into, I say it's a sketch. It's in my journal sketchbook that I've done of Purbeck scenes, and so it's a sort of keepsake, if you like. So I'm going to be a little bit more careful with it, a lot more careful than I was when I was sketching the boat earlier in the day. And that's the difference really between the two types of sketchbooks. You've got that type of very quick, sketchy scenario where you're just learning and you're trying out new things. This is a little bit more considered. This is something that is part of a collection of sketches that I can look back on in future. Let's get on with it. Now, a nice French ultramarine wash all the way along the top here. And I'm just going to paint into that with some clear water because there's some sort of hazy, high-level cloud there. I want to give an indication of that. And then a little bit more light red, just to warm it up as it comes down towards the horizon. Perhaps a little bit of permanent rose in there too. That's it. Very simple sky. Sea is significantly darker, so I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre. It makes it a little more green, but also a little more grey at the same time, because it's a warm, earthy yellow. It might not be blue enough. I might need to add a little bit of Prussian into that. I'm quite happy for that to bleed up into the sky. I need to make sure I come round Old Harry Rocks here. This is quite an awkward position for painting. I don't recommend it, but it's mainly thanks to the people that decided to sit on the bench that I was going to use at the top of the hill. But these things happen. You have to cope with it. It's no good just packing up and going home. I'm going to keep this nice and wet here because I want to paint these trees into it so that they're soft. Leave a few little chips of paper here just as the sea's coming in towards the coast. Well, let's get some cadmium yellow into that for the sunlit areas. Maybe a little bit of yellow ochre as well, just adds to that sunlit feel. There, that's quite nice. And then I've got a very sunlit green here for this area of field. Before that dries, I need to make sure that I put in some darks for the bottom of the tree. And for that I'm using burnt sienna and Prussian blue just to give some dark to the shadow side of the trees. There's a few beach huts and things just on the edge of the North Beach there that I just want to indicate quite simply. No detail, it's in the distance. And that started to dry, so I've got a hard edge there that I don't want. There we are. I think it's time to let all that dry up, and then I can come back to it and just put a little bit of extra definition in. Now there's some nice sun just catching the headland here. And there's some nice wind catching my sketchbook too, which is making things a little bit tricky. The rest of the headland is largely in shade, so I'm painting it this sort of cooler blue colour. But I do want the sense that there's light catching there. There's just a little bit of light up there too, and then it comes down to quite dark over the end of Ballard Point there. There's just a tiny little bit of grass that you can pick out on the top of that part of the headland, and of course on the top of Old Harry Rocks there too. Just helps to give them a little bit of extra definition. I'm just going to soften that edge there so it just all blends down into the cliff side, and this is building up quite nicely. It's helping to capture this sense of evening sunlight up on Swanage Downs, and that's what I want in my Purbeck journal sketchbook. I'm getting to the end of it, as I mentioned earlier, and it's just a lovely record of my time spent here. Okay, now let's just test how dry this is. There's quite a stiff breeze here. It's an onshore breeze, but I think it's dried that out, and that just allows me to just add a little bit of definition onto these trees here on the highlight side. And what I want to do is just suggest a little bit of movement on the water, and it comes in the form of sort of broken areas where the wind is catching it, and sometimes it's darker, and it's quite nice to do this. It just gives it a little bit more modelling, a little bit more texture. I don't want it to all be hard-edged though, by any means, so with a damp brush I'm just going to get in there and soften that off in a few places, and it just helps sort of bed it down and makes it look a bit more realistic. Okay, so let's just put a few darks in here. A mix of burnt sienna and ultramarine, just around the base of the cliff here. Don't run it all the way along, that just spoils the look of things. It just makes it look as though you've outlined everything with a dark pen, and that just really does ruin it, so try and avoid doing that. What I've got also are a few hedges, and they mark out the fields on top of Ballard Down, and again I'm just going to quickly suggest those in here with a few marks. Don't fiddle around with this. This is something that's in the distance, don't forget. Trees and thickets right up on the top there that are just about visible. They're always there. Try and get those in. Then what I'm going to do is just suggest some tree trunks and a couple of branches in here. They blend into the foliage now. It's spring, so we haven't got a sense of winter trees, so you have to be quite careful with this, but they're there. It really is quite dark in here, so let's put a little more detail down here. Just want this side of the tree to be a lot darker, actually. It really is quite dark in there, and it gives a nice feeling of directional evening light to the sketch, so let's get that in there as well. That really helps. That's a dark mix of ultramarine and light red. Yeah, that just gives it a little bit more dynamic contrast. I like that. It's very dark in here too. I say I'm going to do a few finishing touches. I may do a little bit more work on this when I get back. The wind's starting to get quite challenging now, just to hold this book still. But let's just put a few marks here. Suggests a bit of texture in this area of foreground that I'm sitting in. Never be afraid to use your finger in a sketch. It just helps to smudge things and blur lines, and leaves little bits of crisp detail here, soft areas somewhere else, and it's just a nice thing to do. Well, thanks ever so much for watching. Hope you found that helpful, and I hope it's given you some ideas and some inspiration to build up some sketchbooks for yourself. It's such an important part of landscape painting. In fact, it's almost impossible for me to conceive the idea of being a landscape painter without sketching regularly. It's something that one of the greatest landscape painters of all time, J.M.W. Turner, did. He was never without a sketchbook, constantly making small scribblings, larger sketches, but the reason he did it was because it stopped his mind telling him that he knew how to draw a tree. The logic in your mind says, well, I know how to draw a tree. I don't need to do that again because I've drawn several in the past. The fact is, you don't. Every tree's different. The shapes are complex. And by sketching all the time, you start to introduce competence and accuracy into your work. And if Turner thought he needed to do it, then I'm going to do it too. And I think it's a good idea for you to do in order to progress with your landscape painting. Thanks once again for subscribing to the Patreon account. I really appreciate that. It's really helpful, and hope you're enjoying this series, and I look forward to catching up with you next time. But in the meantime, keep sketching.